might want to put your microphone on, Chairman.
Yes. We don't appear to have any members of the public, but there may be some on the virtual system. So I can say that members of the public will be given an opportunity to speak during the public open sessions, but not at other times. The meeting is being filmed, and by being present, attendees are deemed to have agreed to be filmed and to the use of those images and sound recordings. I can advise that attendees should not disclose any personal information of individuals, as this will infringe the data protection rights of that individual. May I please ask everyone to mute their microphones when not speaking. Right, so item 1 on the agenda, apologies. Do we have any apologies? No. Thank you. Right, that's good. Shows enthusiasm. Declaration of interests. To receive statutory declaration of interest from members in relation to disclosable pecuniary interests in any agenda item and any non-pecuniary interests in any agenda item. Does anybody have any interest to disclose? No, pecuniary or non-pecuniary. Chairman's and item 3, Chairman's announcements. I don't think I have any announcements, do I, Peter?
The only thing I can recall is you went to the Allotment Association meeting.
Oh yes, we had an Allotments Association meeting on last week, and it was very amicable. I think they're quite happy with the things that the council is doing down there, and I think the only issue was that they wanted a bridge, another bridge over the ditch that's down there, but that's probably out of our budgetary capability at the present time. Right, item 4, public open session. Are there any people on the virtual thing? No. Okay. Item 5, invited speaker. There is none. Item 6, members' questions. Does any member have any questions? Councillor Woodhead.
Thank you. It's more of a thank you rather than a question, but I just wanted to sort of put on the record to say thank you for, I guess, the Public Realm team and also the wider council staff for getting the Commonwealth Wargrave Commission signs up at Drove Road Cemetery on both entrances. I know it's taken a long time liaising with the CWGC and others to do that, but I think they look really smart. It's drawing attention to what's there in the cemetery, and obviously in the next few months, I hope we can have a sort of a dedication ceremony or something like that we can recognise it properly. But I know it's been a bit of a slog, so I just wanted to say thank you to for persisting with it all, basically.
Well, thank you. Yes, I agree. We should have some sort of opening ceremony. Who would organise that? Then the council or the British Legion?
I mean, I think it's going to be a bit of both, really. I mean, I think we'd want the British Legion involved, some of the local cadet units, and probably the vicar as well, town vicar and others. But I haven't quite got that far yet. But I imagine that with the sort of group and anyone in the community who wants to attend, really.
Yeah. Okay. Right. Any other questions? No. Item 7, minutes and recommendations of meetings. So we have the minutes here. Are they page 6? Firstly, for accuracy, page 7. That's it. Right. Matters arising. Is that a separate agenda item? Yes, item 8, matters arising. Page 1, page 6. Anybody? No. Page 7. Anybody? No. Right, already. Item 9, items for consideration. A, play areas project update. So we have a written paper on this. Would you like to comment on this, Karim or Peter?
Thank you, Chairman. Just briefly, just in addition to the report, I mean, we're now at the stage of the play areas project where we're entering what we call year 2, essentially. So it's 23-24 from April onwards. And we're in the report, as it sets out, we're seeking the next phase of PWLB funding essentially for the 4 play areas in question. This is part of obviously an ongoing journey. Officers presented to both previous PLOSs and town councils the 5-year plan for the project. So that's why I say we're entering essentially year 2. That 5-year plan did set out the kind of compelling reasons for all 16 plus play areas across the town, while we needed to regenerate those pieces of equipment. I'll pause there. I don't know if Jonathan, you want to just say anything briefly in terms of areas. We'll pause there. For discussion. Thanks.
Just a question really on the specifications proposed in Appendix A. Are these seem quite specific in terms of the equipment we're asking for? Is that deliberate, or would we be putting these as sort of a guide as to what we're looking for and expect that the tenderers come forward with a proposal along those lines, but maybe with some slight differences in equipment?
Yeah, most of it's been made to put in sort of some inclusion within that environment, especially places where it hasn't got any in the next 4, so to speak. Is that what we were talking about, aren't we? And then with Brunel Drive in particular, it's lost a lot of its wooden equipment because it's become unsafe, rocking, and the wood's rotting. So we've been cutting it off as we've gone along. So all you're left there with now is a seesaw and a swing set. And the swing set's fine. The seesaw's, it's getting to the end, and you can't even get the parts for it anymore. So the other 3 all have some defects in there that require. It was sent out a little while back with. I think I set an inspection report for each individual site. A lot of it is that the play area surface, which is the rubber square matting, is failing, and also the rusting of the joints on things like the climbing frames at Kaiser Court, Berkeley Square. There's also some rock in some of the old Wicksteed rocking things that are on springs. It's not the thing itself that's moving; it's the concrete underneath. But they look really tatty. You can't really paint them either because they're like a moulded plastic. So there's the other places that it would be beneficial to change some of the pieces that are in there. Things that are fading, falling apart, and different things like that. So.
Can I ask a question, Chair?
Yes, certainly.
Yeah. Jonathan, can we just be clear? This is basically a very base specification. So whoever gets round to tendering for the work can give a kind of vision for how they might beautify the area and make it as good as it possibly can be.
Yeah, of course they will. Yeah, and some of it's utilised. In one place in particular at Brunel Drive, there's quite an open space to the left of the fenced off area, and that's crying out for something else to go exactly there, because it doesn't have to be fenced off when you've got older children playing with it. But yeah.
So just to summarise, this is an idea of what the sort of things we'd like to see, but we're expecting the tenderers to come forward with a holistic proposal.
Yes, exactly the same
vision. With something that's likely to be in the ballpark of this specification.
Exactly the same as what we've done with with Franklin's.
So firstly, thank you for this. And I don't know about colleagues, but I think as a committee and as a council, we've rightly been so submerged in Franklin's. This is probably the first time we've actually had a chance to think about all of the other play areas that we have and that we're responsible for. And I've given it a bit of reflection over the last few days, and looking at some of these play areas here, I'm thinking about Poppyfield, Berkeley Close. They're very small. They're appealing to a very specific age range, probably certainly under 6s, I would say. I forget how large children get when they get to certain ages, but I think they're roughly under 6 years old. And we have other play areas, whether it's Watkins Walk or some of the other ones around Saxon Gate, which are all appealing to roughly the same age range, all under 6s. So I guess from my point of view, and I know there's various things to bear in mind here about the state of the equipment, the safety, etc., but I'm almost thinking that we need to be just a little bit more strategic about where our play areas are for certain children of certain ages, because if I look here at Playfield Close, for example, I've had some feedback from a resident who lives down there and says, you know, nobody uses it. And so we need to think, well, you know, we did what we did to Buttercup Mead and got rid of that play area, and that's obviously not the ideal thing to do, but maybe there's some sense in doing that in order to concentrate the investment elsewhere a little bit more. So I'm just thinking where we're at in terms of this project and this program of work, and we know that Franklin's is the priority. I would almost be tempted to focus probably on Brunel Drive, because we know that that needs a lot of work and it is not a small play area. But then perhaps focus on something more like Kitelands as well, which I know has got a lot of equipment, but you know, we could do something really brilliant with that park. And then in year 3, perhaps think very strategically about the other, whatever it is, sort of 10 play areas, all of which are aimed at a similar age group. And perhaps we could look to bulk buy some equipment and get good deals on that. So I'm not going to propose that at this stage. I'd like to hear what colleagues think, but that's certainly where I'm going on this.
Yeah, with Playfield Close, when I went round and did the inspections with Playfield Close, I knocked on the residents' houses, and they said the similar thing to what you said, that people aren't using it or it's not for the children. But if you look in what we proposed, there's a little green area off to the side of it, which would add up the age group. It's got a little slide and a climbing frame and everything. That was the idea in the original reports that were sent out. But the other two, Berkeley and Kaiser, they're both getting, some of the equipment is getting to the end of its life. That's the reason for these.
Kaiser's not on here though, I don't think.
Thank you. I'm similar view to Councillor Face, keen to understand where our priorities are, what the usage is, but also, I mean, you know, although I've got a 6-year-old and a 2-year-old, I look at these things and go, what's a spring elephant? What's a city swing? What does that look like? You know, the pictures paint 1,000 words. I would need to understand what that looks like in terms of what makes sense. And I know we're going to go out to tender, but before we could go anywhere near making a decision, and again, I know it's indicative, so I'm not picking holes in that, but it would be good to understand what the officers are thinking for each play area. And I think the point around age specific, we either go with under 6 and make it so that you've got a swing that an under 6-year-old can use, because we've got some inconsistency. We've got a slide that an under 6 can use, and then a swing that they can't, or a 2-year-old. So that it's just looking at each play area specifically and being very clear. Right, what's the age range for this equipment, and decide we're either going to do different age groups, or we're going to concentrate on one and do that properly. Because I think that's a problem around, but the principle is fine, but I would like to know, you know, I need pictures really, and I think again prioritising which ones. Albeit I know the reason why probably these have come up, because you, as you've explained, around the safety and the sort of the condition, but it's about usage and prioritisation, I think.
Thank you, Chairman. Firstly, we note the progress made on to Franklin's, which I think is most welcome. And indeed, I had a very positive comment from a childminder at the weekend and how much they were looking forward to it and how good it looked. And I think that's positive, and particularly if we go out to tender, if we can get similar presentations done, that will enthuse. But more pertinently, the question that I have, and I need an answer to this before I comment on the comments made by Councillors Fage and Foster, is we've got proposals here as what we might do, but what we haven't got is the anticipated timescale for the implementation, i.e. the actual work being carried out, because depending on that and that proposal may depend on that, will depend my next question. So when is it anticipated by officers that this work would be carried out, and when would the new improved facilities be open?
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Councillor Strawn. So in terms of a timeline to all this, subject to committee members' views on the areas we're talking about within the report or beyond, and subject to that recommendation going to Town Council, officers would like to obviously go to a sort of tender exercise around about sort of April, May time for this. It depends, it's entirely on the success of the application for the PWLB second round, if you like. So the 23-24 stage of that. And then obviously working that through in terms of the process, when that would be likely to be successful. So running something slightly after the application for the PWLB loan tender-wise would be prudent to do, obviously, because we wouldn't know if we were successful or not in that. So it's largely a sort of a chicken and egg, but with a kind of timeline work to work through that works could potentially begin in September, October time.
Right, thank
essentially.
you. So the works will not start at the best until, say, September this year, coming year. What we've got is we've got a whole summer before that would actually occur. And therefore, in my view, the comments raised by Councillors Fage and Foster about reviewing exactly what we're doing would make perfect sense in that we could delay the tender process until we're absolutely certain on exactly what we're trying to achieve. And in that case, we could, and I see the town clerk's got some observations to make, but if we've got that time, it's not as though we're going to be opening it in readiness for the summer season. So in that respect, maybe a little bit of a delay to get it absolutely right is preferable to rushing it through. And just on looking at the sites, Berkeley and Brunel Drive are very, very close together. So is it right that that part gets such a good concentration when other parts of the town don't? I've got an open mind on that, but those are my observations so far.
Thank you. So I think my points are similar to others we've heard, but maybe my emphasis is slightly different. So it's a lot of money. In my experience, estates tend to age. Young families move in and then they sometimes stay there. Sometimes they even retire there. So the equipment that may have been suitable when an estate was new isn't necessarily the same equipment you would choose to have now. So if we do have time, I think it's useful to actually, and any private business would do this before spending £100,000. You know, what is the catchment area for each play area? And that will depend on the age group, of course, because young children don't tend to go as far as older children. And, you know, what do we anticipate the approximate number of children of each age group is within that catchment area? And that will help us gauge the need. And I think we somehow need to get some indicative data around that to help inform our decisions, please.
Yeah, I think there's three observations to make. I think members make some really interesting comments connected to having some sense of overall strategy in regard to which play area is used for what type of client base and what's the broad strategy against all of our play areas and how do we get that balance right. So there's a question there to answer. I've done a draft paper for council for the 14th of February where I'll do a detailed presentation on where we are with PWLB over the next 3-4 years. So a breakdown of what's been going on and timelines associated with that. The only thing that I've got in the back of my mind, of course, is that lessons learned is that typically it takes about 4 months to get a PWLB application through, to draw down the funds and have it in our accounts. And obviously when we built the budget for 23-24, we built within the revenue budget an element to repay that any future loan. So that's there ready to be used when members make that decision. But we do need to be thoughtful that actually when we need to press go on whatever you decide and we need the money in the bank ready to use, we need to have kind of got through that PWLB process.
Okay, so I think it's it's unfortunate when PLOS happens to fall then, isn't it? That, you know, we're going to see the detail on PWLB, and perhaps the best thing we can do this evening is not make a decision around a particular number, given that that's probably not this committee's remit anyway. Anything would have to be scrutinised by F&GP, and council's already passed the fact that PWLB spending needs to go via council. So, I mean, if we put sort of the number to one side, perhaps we can give a sense of direction from the committee. So if I were to make a proposal, so we're being asked to consider a few things. So note the progress made on Franklin's recreation ground. I think we can note that and note that it's been good. We look forward to seeing the we look forward to seeing the landscaping design come to council, which I understand a lot of that work will start once the heavy machinery, etc., has put in all of the new equipment. So we can note that progress and look forward to seeing the landscaping. But then in terms of agreeing the sites for the project to regenerate, I think we have one of two choices. Either we look strategically at our very small play areas and prioritize those, all of them, or probably my preference that we focus on a site like, we know that Brunel Drive is actually quite a large site, probably goes above 6 years old, that and perhaps Kitelands as our strategic play areas that we know we can do better with. I think Kitelands has a lot of equipment, but we still have a vision. We need a vision for what that park looks like. So propose that we focus on Brunel Drive and Kitelands, get a plan for those, and then consider how it's funded in due course, and then perhaps consider all of the smaller sites the year after next. So I'd actually like to propose that.
Councillor Thomas.
I'd like to second that. I think that's a good plan. I was wondering about Kitelands as well. With Berkeley Close, Brunel Drive, these four we've got here, it looks like we're repairing and making good as fast as we can, but I think the strategic plan is the best way forward.
Your microphone is repeatedly off, Chairman.
Right, Councillor Fage has made a proposal. So all those in favour, please indicate. Thank you. All those against? Abstentions? Right, thank you, Councillor Knight. Right, so that's agreed then. Brunel and Kitelands, and leave the others to perhaps further consideration. Thank you. All right, moving on. Item B, allotments improvement project. So we have we have a written report. So Head of Governance and Strategic Partnerships, would you like to comment on this at all? No further
No,
comment.
thanks, not for now, thanks. Chair.
Councillor Strawn.
Thank you, Chairman. I just wonder whether when you had your meeting with the allotment holders, whether this was discussed with them and what their observations were on it.
Sorry, so can you say that again?
Yes, you had a meeting with the allotment holders last week, as I understand it, and I was wondering what the observations were of the Allotment Holders Association on these proposals, or were they made aware of them?
Yeah.
And what were their observations, please?
Thank you. Can you comment on that, Graham? Yeah.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, thanks, Councillor Straw. So yes, we did meet with members of the BAA last week, and it was a broadly positive meeting. This did definitely come up, and again, they were, I think it's fair to say, largely positive about all of it, and they look forward to the completed layout, if you like, and half plots as they're going to be kind of marked out. I think they particularly noted that it being on the north end of the site and being south facing would be rather a good thing for growing, essentially.
I note the head of governance mentioned largely. Were there some downsides to it, and what were those?
Yes, please do, please.
Okay, so I'll answer your question. So I think you're right to say it was broadly positive. I think the only difference of opinion in regard to the chair of the Allotment Association was that our numbers of people who are waiting for an allotment, we started around about 74. We got it down to early 40s, yeah, and then we're beginning to get to an increase again, what, 45, 46, 47, yeah. So his sense was that there's never going to be a perfect world. There will always be a volume of people who want an allotment. There's little churn connected to this, and that we're well intentioned and we're trying to source that, but it's a difficult thing to provide a perfect solution for. And in time, and Corinne will update you, we still need to find an alternative space for a variety of different reasons. We're still obviously renting this from Central Beds. That may change over time, and there continues to be a high demand for this. And actually, surprisingly, there's quite a good demand for half plots and quarter plots. But I should add some piece of good news. You'll notice that within this paper, there is no request for PWLB funding. All of this effectively is being made happen from the existing budget and also the good work of our public realm colleagues.
Councillor Foster.
I'm rather intrigued about the micro planters, a 1 metre square patch of earth that you travel all the way down the allotment, and you have 1 metre and you pay £8 a year for it. It's an intriguing idea. I wonder what the reaction of the association was to that.
I think there's an element of experimentation in this, Councillor Foster. But Karim, can you remember what was their reaction? Did they make a comment on that?
Thanks. So not in terms of charges, essentially, because that is exploratory. That was just largely indicative. And besides, charges essentially would definitely need to come back to certainly PLOS in the first instance for a discussion and then see how we're going on there. But the idea of micro planters, be it 1 metre by 1 metre or 2 metres by 2 metres, etc., they were largely positive in terms of they'd actually reached out already, because we had asked them separately to reach out to their members, and they thought that was actually rather a good thing for them. Not necessarily though people who are on a waiting list, but other people who would be interested to kind of take this on as a kind of call it new generational type thing. And they also mentioned that it'd be useful to have those microplanters potentially installed in our flooded plot areas too, as long as they're above the ground clearly, and close to waist height, I think was another thing they raised. So it was discussed quite freely at the meeting and previous one as well.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, Peter, did you want to make an additional comment?
I'll only make one very quick comment. I've sent a note to our committee clerk today to make sure that the minutes of any working group are shared with council, so that actually you can see the conversations that are taking place. I think that's good practice. At least you can observe the conversations. I think there's a good relationship with our allotment association now. Having said that, approximately about only 45% of the people who actually have allotments belong to the allotment association. There's also an open invitation to any other allotment holders who'd like to come along. And it's that regular flow of information, I think, that breaks down barriers.
Right, thank you. Any other comments on the allotments progress report? Councillor Fage.
Yeah, so this first paragraph on page 12. So I remember that was discussed under exempt on the 22nd of November. The project deliverable, so we allocated this year £50,000 when we were sort of guesstimating, if you like, how much money we were going to need for various projects. We did something similar for Franklin, something similar for some of our assets, something for our allotments. We found we haven't needed that £50,000. Have we used £10,000 of Public Work Loan Board money already, or is there still £50,000 that will roll over to next year?
We've used zero for this.
And we're still going to use zero
Correct,
this year for
zero,
allotments?
yeah.
Okay, so actually the proposal today really is just to accept the recommendations that essentially we spend £935 on these planters. Is that really what we're looking at today?
That's absolutely correct. And again, I just wanted to reiterate and a thank you, because there's been a lot of hard work from Carl and the other people within Public Realm, which has negated our costs. It's been an internal solution.
Great. Okay, well, I'll move that recommendation.
Right, is there a second for that? Thank you. Right, all those in favour? Against? Abstentions? No. Thank you. Right. Okay, item C, football and terms and conditions policy review. So we have a document here from the place shaping manager. Unfortunately, he's not with us. But perhaps if you, sorry. Yes, please. Yes, I think because it's obviously there's a lot of detail in here. We don't want to get bogged down in detail. We need to the agreement if we can avoid it. So, Karim, perhaps you can give us an indication on this.
Thanks, Joe. Just really briefly, because this is essentially place shaping manager's report, but essentially the policy and the review and policy review and terms and conditions are set out there, were due for review, and the place shaping manager has just done that, hence the report in front of yourselves tonight. The main aspect which has been altered, if you like, within the document is the changes relating to the new online booking functions and kind of guidance around that. So obviously we'd invite members' views as to whether or not it's suitable to progress or if it needs to be changed again.
Okay, fine. Does anybody have any comments on any of this? Councillor Pullinger.
So I've got a few questions and clarifications really, so I hope officers can help as the officer who wrote it's not here, but a couple of things really. One is in relation to key holders. So in the allocated key holders section of the agreement, it says there are no allocated key holders and that keys are to be signed for and collected prior to each booking. Is that what happens today in practice, or do some clubs have allocated key holders? They have keys, yeah. So if this is a change, I think that's
Some clubs have keys.
yeah.
Yeah.
So if we're saying that clubs won't have keys in the future and they're going to have to come down here every Friday to get keys, I don't think that's a workable option in practical terms. So that was the first point. The second is the provision for people who aren't football teams to hire the pitches? Do we actually offer that as a facility? Because it's clear it says that the system is only available to proven football clubs to book, but do we actually make our pitches available for other residents to book if they have a reason to do so? I think I think that they were my main questions. Yeah.
We have
Can we
done
get
in
a
the past
response
as
to that?
children's play groups have sometimes asked if they can have a picnic out on one of the parts, Stratton in particular, and they've used the facilities there for baby changing and stuff. So that has happened. But there's no reason why anybody can't book out the pavilion if they wanted to. They're not the cleanest, tidiest places. You can imagine the amount of mud that gets trudged in and out. So they're not ideal for really nice events, but for somebody needing toilet facilities or something like that, just throw a picnic, they'd be fine.
Yeah. So,
Okay.
Sorry. Thank you. Just briefly, if I may just add to that, it's true. We could incorporate that in the policy as well. Say that other sports would be available, suitable sports, and other events could be, to make it a bit wider, more inclusive. Yeah.
Yes. Why not?
Can I make an observation, Chair?
Yes, please.
I think one of the things that this is trying to solve, and it's not going to solve it straight away, is that my understanding is that a number of individuals and organisations use our facilities in an unstructured way sometimes and don't necessarily pay for those facilities. So what we're striving to do here, I think, is to try and formalise our arrangements to make sure that we have something on offer that people can sign up to, and that they can access it in a more formal way so that we can record that and understand who's using it and watch that volume of usage.
All right, thank you. Okay. Well, do you want to just come back then?
yes, I just wanted to come back. So an example is there could be a group of people who want to use it for ultimate frisbee or for softball or something that's not football. So I think we need to just make sure that we provide the opportunity for that to be done.
Right. Councillor Foster.
Yeah, I just noticed on bottom of page 12, the sign for and on behalf of Biggleswade Social Club. Is that an example, or do Biggleswade Social Club have a football team, which I wasn't aware of? But I thought it used to be the one that used to be called the Working Men's Club. I just wondered why that was.
Do they have a football team? Maybe they do.
I honestly don't know, I'm afraid. I'll ask our place shaping manager. Come
Well,
back.
yes, let's just assume that's a sort of example of what it might say if they did have a. Oh, Councillor Straw, yes, I've seen him.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm just looking at the policy, and I think it's important that we have a policy. I don't think that the council should be going through the minutiae of the legal agreement. I think that's officers' job to deal with that, subject to a reasonable observation. But I am concerned about the usage in some respects. I think the Scouts have football teams, so I think we need to take it away from just being football so it can be used for general recreational use. But I'm looking at cancellations and amendments and the procedures there, because it says in the event of extreme weather and emergencies, it is at BTC's discretion whether to cancel sessions and whether to provide refunds. There will be occasions where referees might decide a pitch is unusable and unsafe. There may be occasions where the town council decides it's unusable and unsafe. And I think in that respect, it would be unreasonable to penalise those who are going to hire it because they presumably want to rehire in the future to make up for that. So I'm concerned about that bit of the policy. But I also think that the emphasis has gone too far online, in that there must be alternative means of communicating with officers in the event of extreme weather, so that telephone calls can be made. And I'd like to, and I think they're going to have to be, unfortunately, an officer dedicated at a weekend to being able to deal with inquiries over pitch hire in case that happens. But nothing is really specified in this policy. So I think the policy needs to be expanded a bit just to cater for that. But when it comes to the agreement, I don't propose going through it in detail. That's not, I don't think, the job of the councillors. I think that's officers' jobs to make sure it's right and all the right names are there.
Right, thank you, Councillor Russell.
I've listened to what colleagues have said, but given the shortage of football facilities in the town at the moment, I'm very unhappy at the thought that somebody might hire a pitch for an odd occasion for something, and it might be when one of our football clubs want to use it. So I don't quite know how we can specify this, but I do think that football should be given the priority, whether it's a formal football club or whether it's an organisation like the Scouts, for instance, who want to hire it for football. But hiring it for picnics and frisbees and goodness knows what, when it might be wanted for football, I think is the wrong way round.
But presumably most of the users have got like a regular booking. We're going to come every Thursday night during the season, this sort of thing. And so all you're really talking about are the odd occasions when there isn't an actual pre-booking of it anyway. And I think we need, just in response perhaps to Councillor Strawn in particular, I do think we need to allow a certain amount of flexibility and a certain amount of common and accept there will be common sense on the part of the council officers when implementing this. So the sort of cases you're saying, if the referee calls it off because it's a waterlogged pitch, then the council will provide a refund, I'm sure, but you don't need to actually go through every possible contingency, setting it down in the agreement, I would suggest. Councillor Pullinger.
There was one other point that I wanted to make, and apologies to Councillor Strawn if it's going into the minutiae too much. But it does refer to all communications being through single points of contact. I think that's potentially impractical on both sides. Firstly, if our single point of contact member of staff is on holiday, or if likewise for whichever the football club is, or the organisation is, if their single point of contact is unavailable for whatever reason. I think, yes, the organisation should have a number of named contacts, that so we know that the person we're dealing with is a representative of them, but I don't think it should be limited to a single person. And likewise, I would have thought all of our office staff should be able to deal with these inquiries as and when, or at least direct them to whoever's going to deal with them when they come in.
Councillor Foster.
Just with that in mind, and you mentioned inquiries, and this has been very pedantic, but the email address showing in the payment section has a missing S. So inquiries at Bigglewade, which might be worth just, I'm sure it would be picked up at some stage, but it's one of those ones that might get missed. So perhaps you could change that.
No, yeah, in the email, yeah. Right, thank you, Councillor Foster. Does anybody else have any further? Councillor Fay.
Yeah, I think something that, I mean, are we being asked to, I think given what's been said by colleagues, it's probably worth bringing this perhaps back to council. Although I think this is sort of 90 to 95% there. Just one thing that I think Councillor Pullinger picked up on, which is really important, is, you know, this business of coming to collect keys. You know, if we do have a football team that block books every Thursday night for a season, and they, whether they pay up front or whatever, you know, there should be an element of whether it's trust or an individual who's on the hook for looking after those keys, and not have to expect them to come into our office between 9 and 4:30, you know, once a week to pick those up. So I would just like to see that reflected in there and obviously implemented in practice, as I'm sure it could be. But other than that, I just propose that this comes back to council, noting councillor's comment.
Yeah, well, you can perhaps think about that point. Consider the point made about the keys. Karim, yes, thank you. Councillor Foster.
It may well have come up. So in paragraph 9, it says, and I may have missed it, that we've got a reference to allocated key holders in paragraph 9, and then we've got not allocated. Is that the point you made earlier? So I thought that's fine.
Right. Well, there's been a number of comments, and I think that's valid. That it should be sort of revised. It's been tabled, commented on, and should come back to council, which is actually proposed. Is there a seconder for that proposal? Right. Any further comments? Right. All those in favour of that proposal, please indicate. Against? That's unanimous, I think. Right. What's next? Resume it. Right. Right, we're on item 10, items for information. A, Linear Wood and Saxon Gate Pocket Park, an oral update from the Head of Governance and Strategic Partnerships. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. So, so it's largely, I mean, it's there's not much news, hence an oral update for this. Otherwise, it would have been a written one, written report. So you may recall that a while ago, late last year, I think it was, Town Council resolved for us to progress a new lease with CVC for these two areas on the set out heads of terms, which had been discussed back then and negotiated with officers. Since then, officers have been in continuous contact with our counterparts at CVC to see how this is progressing, this matter internally there. Most recently in January, so last week, in fact, where we received an email back from them saying that it is all progressing, albeit slowly, but smoothly, through the estate manager who is interfacing with their legal team, Pathfinder Legal, I think it is still. They're expecting, and so they will be drawing up a new draft lease and then sending that back to us as soon as that's ready. So that they're anticipating is around March time for April. So nothing's changed on the timeline, essentially. That's where we're at.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Any questions or comments from members on that one? Councillor Fage.
Am I right in thinking that the exact detail does come back to council for agreement prior to signing, if I'm not mistaken?
Yeah. Well, I assume so, yes.
Yeah, no, certainly when there's a draft lease coming back, officers will double, triple check that it's exactly as it was set out when it was negotiated with CVC, and then we'll bring that back as part of a report, so you can all see that as well.
Yeah. Councillor Strawn.
Thank you, Chairman. Could the clerk please clarify that? It's all very well the draft lease coming back to us, but under our standing orders and rules, does the lease, before it actually have to be signed, does that have to be approved by council in its final form by formal council motion, or is there delegated powers on that?
Actually, I think there's delegated powers, but I would need to check with Councillor Strawn. I think there's delegated powers, but I will double check.
Councillor Knight.
Thank you. My recollection is when we discussed this, the terms were very indicative. And in particular, there were some concerns raised around the condition of the area and the potential liabilities, things like fencing around the outside. So I think it's really important we do get that condition report and understand what the potential liabilities could be over the life of the lease, please.
Any other comments on this subject? No? Okay, thank you very much, Karim, for that update. Right, item 11, public open session. Do we have any members of the public online? No? Okay. Item 12, exempt item. So we now move that it's in the public interest that the public and press are excluded. All those in favour? Yes.
Move it.
Right, so. Sorry, can somebody just, sorry, what are you saying?
Just make sure we close it down a second before we go.
Oh, yeah.